All right, Matt, interesting fight at women's strawweight between somebody who's been in this division for a very long time, actually since its inception, and Randa Markos, Quiet Storm, coming at us from Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And I think one of the most interesting parts of this entire fight is the fact that Randa Markos was normally able to train at a couple of different gyms in Windsor and then cross-train over the bridge in Detroit. But you're not really able to do that. And I know that she's had a fight since the world's kind of gone a little bit nuts against Amanda Hebos back earlier on this year. Now, that fight, albeit February into March, it was March 14th. And I remember the big story about it. So she loses Amanda Hebos. She was a plus 315 underdog in that fight. And the fact that when she came home, she had to quarantine for 14 days. And that's the way that we do things here in Canada. So she had to do that. I know John McDessie was also on that card, but I just wanted to shout that one out because in the training camp getting ready for that one, she could have trained in the States. At the time, she had time to train in the States and Canada. For this one, not so much. So I'd be interested to see how the training camp went there. Now, for Mackenzie Dern, the question marks were, well, yikes. I mean, she comes in, she gets a big win over Ashley Yoder. It was a split decision. Maybe she didn't look her best. Then she gets a win over Amanda Bobby Cooper, submits her. Then she loses to Amanda Hebos, and it was like, all right, see you later. Hype train's derailed. Let's forget about Mackenzie Dern. She has a kid at one point. What's going to happen? She fights poor old Hannah Cyphers on short notice. Poor old pouty face Hannah Cyphers. And my goodness gracious, she didn't have to take Cyphers down to get the submission. And it was lightning quick. Boom, Mackenzie Dern back on top of the world. So you know how credentialed of a grappler Mackenzie Dern is. I don't have to tell you. You know about Randa Markos. And here's the thing. Since Randa Markos came into the UFC off The Ultimate Fighter Season 20, her first fight was against Jessica Penne. She lost it. She beat Aisling Daly. She wins it. She loses to Kovacevic. She beats Jocelyn Jones-Lyberg. She loses to Casey, beats Esparza, loses to Grasso, beats Lima, loses to Ansarov, draw against Marina Rodriguez, beats Angela Hill, loses to Claudia Gadea, beats Ashley Yoder, loses to Amanda Hebos. Matt, does this pattern continue? Does she beat Mackenzie Dern? I'm losing my words. Law of averages, she wins this fight. What do you think of this one here?
Okay, Mackenzie Dern's not a great striker, but that's not a big deal because you know how credentialed she is at jiu-jitsu, and she's basically the best women's grappler in the world. Randa Markos' striking is not good, and this is going to be one of the few fights where Randa just kind of stands there with her arms out, and she really needs her takedowns to open up her overall MMA game. And Randa Markos, who I think she's never going to be champ, but I do think she's another one who she offers everyone kind of a hard fight, no matter who you are. But the problem is there's so much tape out on her at this point that you can see when she does fight those upper echelon fighters, they just sort of figure her out at this point. And the Claudia Gadella fight was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. They just kind of stood there and looked at each other a lot, and there wasn't a lot of striking. And I'm kind of worried that this fight is going to go one of two ways. It's either going to end with a Mackenzie Dern submission fairly quick, or the wrestling defense of Randa Markos is going to keep this fight on the feet. And the fans are going to be treated to a 15-minute striking exchange between these two ladies, which would be the worst case scenario.
The worst part about that, Matt, I just want to chime in here really quickly. The fact that both have negative striking differentials, and you have more, like you said, you have more tape out there on Randa Markos, so the average is going to be a little bit different. But 2.964 to 3.31 against for Markos, 3.144 for Mackenzie Dern to 3.97 taken. That's not great. In terms of percentages, 41% landed or accuracy for Randa Markos, 32% for Dern. You know, Dern is a grappler. She is not like the Ryan Hall of striking. She's not even the Chrome Gracie of striking. She's kind of like, and I have to keep it in the Diaz camp, she's like the Chris Avila of striking. Sorry, Chris. But Mackenzie Dern, again, the submission ability. So Randa Markos, I would assume, is going to keep it on the feet. Now, when she takes on strikers, she has a chance to submit them. She submitted Angela Hill. That wasn't that long ago. They talk about Angela Hill fighting all the time, winning fights, what have you. And yeah, the fight against Michelle Waterson was incredibly close. The fight against Randa Markos ended in the first round with a Markos submission. So it can happen, but I don't see that happening against Mackenzie Dern.
No, this is like the most budget version of Ben Askren versus Damian Maia you're ever going to get. Because you look at Dern, what's she good at? She's got great jiu-jitsu, but her striking's kind of limited, sort of like Damian Maia. And then you look at Randa Markos, she's a pretty good wrestler, of course not to the level of Ben Askren, but she really needs her wrestling to open up the rest of her MMA game. You're going to try to take down the best women's grappler in your division. I just don't see how Randa Markos can win this fight.
It's an interesting one. I mean, Mackenzie Dern opened as a minus 330 favorite, now at a minus 168 average over on best fight odds. So a lot of really quick money in the first day or so, from minus 330 to minus 170, 160. It's kind of been around there. Markos open as a plus 270, automatic shift plus 140. So something happened there. And it's one of those ones where it makes you scratch your head. And I probably would stay away from this fight if I'm being totally honest. It's not one, again, women's strawweight. We're not talking about highly ranked opponents. If you look over on Tapology, out of 802 votes, overwhelming majority, 89% going with Dern, 76% saying she's going to win by submission. That's probably the cop-out answer and the most likely scenario. But for all the reasons that you mentioned, Matt, I mean, Randa Markos, her striking, it's not like she's evolved into, boom, I'm going to start throwing head kicks and set things up with, low calf kicks. It's just the stalking presence. She keeps her head out and her arms out at the same time. It's not like you got a fighter in Mackenzie Dern that's going to catch her with anything crazy. But if it gets in close, if it gets into a clinch, even if Randa Markos gets on top, oh boy, it's the Mackenzie Dern show.
Yeah, and you're saying stalking like she's just a Gaethje. Her stalking is, I'm just going to kind of walk for it, not throw a lot. And that's really frustrating because if Randa Markos just let her hands go a little bit more and use the same amount of wrestling as she does now, she'd be she'd at least be higher ranked than she is now. And she posed people much more of a threat because her wrestling is really, really good. And just her striking is so limited that I don't ever really see her beating the really upper echelon of the strawweight division. And again, not that Mackenzie Dern is that upper echelon, just yet at least. But Mackenzie Dern by submission is fairly safe pick.
Matt, both of us going with Mackenzie Dern. It is an interesting fight, and Markos' record doesn't tell the entire story. So make sure you keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. Check out the rest of the videos in the playlist, including our extended look at our main event between Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley. And Matt, as we always say with Fight Night picks, let's get into it.